Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. It's your favorite therapist back again. I'm pretty sure by now that you have read the title, and I think I have a good show for us today. So, as the title reads, we are going to just dig into the last bill that JFK signed. Right? It was the Mental Health Act of 1963. We will get dive deeply into this. So we're gonna be here for a while. So just get comfortable, get your coffee, and just relax. Let's get into this. Um, and also not only talking about the last bill JFK signed, which I'm pretty sure it was done in good faith, but also the implications that were to follow, even leading to now, to the present day. So it all will hopefully blend together and make sense when we get to the end. So, like you see on my at the bottom, this is all things mental health. We're going to talk about it. We're going to get the word out. We will no longer stigmatize mental health issues. We will no longer sweep it under the rug. We will talk about it honestly and freely so that anybody who is going through such issues will not be ashamed to seek help because there's nothing wrong with seeking help for any type of mental issues you have. And also, um, on this live, you will see where kind of the stigma of mental health started, where it started to come to play. Like I said, I have a lot to bring today. So, without further ado, we're going to get started. The first thing I want to dig into is this this is a long word. The institutionalization. I was practicing that word all night and I still didn't get it right. But it's okay. So we're gonna start reading this, and of course I'm gonna pick it apart for you all so we can understand it all together. So this is the institutionalization, and it is called a psychiatric Titanic. Okay, so as you know, this is not my work. This is an excerpt drawn from chapters 1-3, an appendix of Out of the Shadows, Confronting America's Mental Illness Crisis by E. Fullatori, MD. So this is his work. I'm just presenting this to the public as educational and research value. So let's get started. So the deinstitutionalization, that is a long word. It's the name given to the of moving severely mentally ill people out of large state institutions and then closing part of or all of these institutions. It has been a major contributing factor to mental illness crisis. The term also describes a similar process for mentally retarded people, but the focus that's in this book that was written is exclusively they're just talking about severe mental illness. Okay, so this began in 1955. So before I go any further, as you know, if you have been paying attention, the mental health crisis or mental health, it seems like everyone is talking about it these days, especially since we are going through and pandemic, right? It has taken a toll on a lot of people's mental health. So it's been a lot of talk about, just okay, making sure your mental health is in check, going to a therapist. If you're listening, you will see that it has been lots of talk about this name. Just do a quick Google search, you will see. But it it has been a lot. How do I say this? Okay, so to me, by doing my research, I have been doing a lot of research for you all just to bring a quality show. Um, the reason I feel that it's been deal these days is because of the pandemic, and it's just become overwhelming to the point that it cannot be hidden any longer. But as you will see, as I start sharing this information with you, you will see that at once upon a time, uh, mental health was alive and thriving. Like the awareness of mental health was alive and thriving. So it was through some presidential bills that were passed, which caused I guess you would say, a roller coaster to eventually it really been just stigmatized and really not talked about until this present time, which we cannot ignore our mental health right at this present moment because we have went through monumental event. We have lost people through COVID, lost jobs, lost livelihood, lost businesses. So that definitely takes a toll. Okay, I just wanted to do that before I go back to the story. So this began in 1955 with the widespread introduction of chlorpromazine and its most commonly known Thorazine. That was the first effective antipsychotic medication and received a major impetus 10 years later with the enactment of federal Medicaid and Medicare. So 1955, the first antipsychotic medication was introduced, basically, right? So at that time, I'm thinking they were the higher ups thought they pretty much had a handle on the on mental illness because they did come up with a drug. And then so that was 1955, and then fast forward 10 years later to 1955. Um, that was when Medicaid and Medicare was started, and let's see, and it became more available because you know of now individuals being able to use Medicaid and Medicare to purchase this psychotic um, medication. So it says deinstitutionalization has two parts. So one part is the moving of the severely mentally ill out of the state institutions and the closing of part of all these institutions. So it was two things. It was first they started moving. So just imagine we have uh I'm assuming it was like state hospitals, right? And where severely mentally ill individuals resided. So in 1955, they decided, which is the I'm assuming. Well, we'll get into that. I'll tell you exactly who decided it. Um, that they no longer needed to be institutionalized, right? So, and not only did they start moving them out into the community, they also started closing the institution. So they didn't have a place to return to. So not only were they moved out of the hospitals into the community, they also no longer had anywhere to return. So it says the former affects people who are already mentally ill. So the latter affects those who become ill after the policy has and for the indefinite future because hospital beds have been permanently eliminated. So just picture this. We're in 1955. Just try to go back to 1955. And so prior to this act, well, prior to this deinstitutionalization, we had it was institutions for people who were severely mentally ill, and so we're talking about like cannot operate on their own. Maybe don't have families to help them. Like they were in the hospital. So that was prior to 1955 and prior to that. So 1955 and fast forward, they closed all of the hospitals and sent the people into the community. And it's going to be interesting because I have a whole article as well. We're going to talk about as well why that was done. It gets interesting, and it's so interesting because I was like researching for something else, like mental health, And I stumbled up on this, and I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. So, okay, so it says the magnitude of deinstitutionalization of the severely mentally ill qualifies it as one of the largest social experiments in American history. Qualifies it as one of the largest social experiments in American history. In 1955, there were 558,239 severely mentally ill patients in the nation's public psychiatric hospital. In 1994, so this would have been roughly, someone help me with the math. Yeah, that long ago. I'm not a math expert. I'm a therapist, not a math expert in any means. So in 1994, this number had been reduced by 486,620 patients to 71,619. So let's just look at that again. So 1955, we had almost 600. There were almost 600,000 mentally ill patients in psychiatric hospitals. So I would say that was like roughly 40 years later, right? There were only 71,619. So my first question, which hopefully is yours too, where did they go? Where did these people go? Because they no longer have a hospital to go into. So where are they? Where did they go? Okay, we're gonna get to that. Great question. So, and you can look at the figure in 1.2 and it'll show you exactly, how it looks. It is important to note, however, that the census of 558,239 patients in public psychiatric hospitals in 1955 was in relation to the nation's total population at the time, which was 164 million. Okay, so it says by 1994, we then had the population had increased from 164 million in 1955 to 260 million in 1994. So, if there had been the same proportion of patients per population in public mental health hospitals in 1994 as there had been in 1955, which was 40 years prior, the patients would have totaled 885,010. The true magnitude of the institutionalization, I don't know why I picked this article. I'm going to have to repeat that word over and over. Then it's the difference between 885,010 and 71,608. And in effect, approximately 92% of the people who would have been living in public psychiatric hospitals in 1995 were not living there in 1994. So I'm just gonna run through this. This is just numbers. I want to get to the good stuff. All right. So let's get down here. I want to move to this part. So it says most of those who were deinstitutionalized from the nation's public psychiatric hospitals were severely mentally ill. Severely ill. Between 50 and 60% of them were diagnosed with schizophrenia. Another 10 to 15% were diagnosed with manic depressive illness and severe depression. An additional 10 to 15% diagnosed with organic brain diseases such as epilepsy, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, and brain damage secondary to trauma. So that means they had one type of trauma and it damaged their brain and they would no longer be the same. Okay, so it says the remaining individuals residing in public psychiatric hospitals had conditions such as mental retardation with psychosis, autism, and other psychiatric disorders of childhood, and alcoholism and drug addiction with concurrent brain damage. The fact that most deinstitutionalized people suffer from various forms of brain dysfunction was not as well understood when the policy of this deinstitutionalization got underway. Mm, mm, mm. Okay. Live when you learn, I guess. Let's carry on. So, what they're basically saying, they did not understand mental health issues at the time when they carried this out. Basically, that's what they're saying. Okay, so the thus the institutionalization has helped create the mental illness crisis by discharging people from public psychiatric hospitals without ensuring that they receive the medication and rehabilitation services necessary for them to live successfully in the community. And keep in mind, this began in 1955. So we hear now what this is going on almost 70 years ago. So this has been going on for a while now. Deinstitutionalization further exacerbated the situation because once the public psychiatric beds had been closed, they were not available for people who later became mentally ill, and this situation continues even to today. Consequently, approximately 2.2 million severely mentally ill people do not receive any psychiatric treatment. Okay, so it says the institutionalization was based on the principle that severe mental illness should be treated in a least restrictive setting, as further done by President Jimmy Carter's Commission on Mental Health. This ideology rested on the objective of maintaining the greatest degree of freedom, self determination, autonomy, autonomy, dignity, and integrity of body, mind, and spirit for the individual while he or she participates in treatment or receives services. This is a laudable goal, and for many, perhaps for the majority of those who are deinstitutionalized, it has been at least partially realized. You give me a second. All right, let me go back. Okay, so for a substantial minority, however, deinstitutionalization has been a psychiatric satanic, definitely devoid of dignity or integrity of body, mind, and spirit. Self determination often means merely that the person has a choice of superstition. The least restrictive setting frequently turns out to be a cardboard box, a jail cell, or terror filled existence plagued by both real and imaginary enemies. So, let's talk about that. So, that is, we'll come back to this in a minute. I'll stay right here. So, that's all right, you guys. Just, um, just think about that. So these people that were released from these hospitals, let me just find that again. The people that were released from this hospital, so we're not talking about people that had some type of mild depression or adjustment disorder. No, these are people, let's go back to here. They were severely mentally ill, right? About 50 to 60% of them were diagnosed with schizophrenia. Another 10 to 15%. So that's like, we'll say about 75% were diagnosed with at least schizophrenia or manic depressive or severe depression. Now, and then the other, so this is the whole like 95% because we got 75 plus 15. That's like 90% were either had schizophrenia, manic depressive, severe depression, or Alzheimer's, brain damage related to some type of trauma. So maybe it was hit in their head and it will no longer be the same. Strokes, epilepsy. So tell me, I just want to know how are these people supposed to just, when, how were they supposed to gain the greatest degree of freedom, self determination, if they can't even think for themselves? And I'm just gonna be blunt with it. I am a therapist. I know a bit about this type of thing. Um, but I'm not gonna be too hard because this was a while ago, and I guess you only know what you know. But looking back, they never really had a chance because they would have never been able to achieve, I guess you want to say, the American dream, because they were dealing with severe mental illness, which in most cases, I'm not going to say all, but in most cases they will be need, at the very least, regular medication, at the very least. That's a lot. Okay, so now we're going to get to the jails and prisons. So this is chapter 3. It says deinstitutionalization doesn't work. We just switch places. Instead of being in hospitals, the people are in jail. The whole system is topsy turvy. And the last person served is the mentally ill person. And that's from a jail issue. So it's confining George Wooten in the Denver County Jail in May 1984 was another indicator of the growing mental illness crisis. The 32-year-old Wooten had been jailed over 100 times, including 28 times in the previous 2 years, for creating disturbances in the community. Wooten had been diagnosed with schizophrenia at age 17, so he had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And each time he used alcohol or sniffed glue or paint fumes, it exacerbated his schizophrenia and led to his disorderly behavior. So, according to a newspaper account, Wooten says he likes jailers in the place. He calls it home. 8 years ago, the officers might have taken Wooten to a community mental health center, a place that was supposed to help the chronically mentally ill. But now they just don't bother. Police have become cynical about the whole approach. They have learned that 2 hours later, they are back on the street. Um, the circle of sending the person to a mental health center doesn't work. So it says removing the mentally ill from jail. So, okay, so we got this. I'll say I don't really want to go into all of this. I will save more of it for another time. Um, I just want to let you see if you see your state. And this is basically patients in mental health hospitals in 1955, and this is 1994. So let me just go to my. So we got Florida. So in 1955, it was 8,000. By 1994, it was 2,760. So this really happened. They literally got rid of the people in these hospitals and put them in the community. They literally did that. Look at this. Let's take a look at the numbers. They literally took these severely mentally ill patients out of the hospital. And not only did they take them out of the hospital, they closed the hospital. So they were never to return again. So, okay. So there's that part of that. So let's get started. Stay with me. Stay with me. So I want to go back here. And now, let's see. Okay, so we were talking about the institutionalization started in 1955 when they just basically started closing the hospitals, the mental health hospitals, sending the severely mentally ill into the community to basically fend for themselves. Well, first they started group homes and they sent the patients into group homes. But just think about it. What were they supposed to do from that? Because um, I'm still doing research on this aspect, but what I gather, the group home was not a place where they were giving 100% care to this severely mentally ill um, patient. It was a place that they were to stay in because you have to realize that they were trying to give these people, let them live their best lives, right? So, and then also you have to remember that they no longer had access to medications like they had in the house. So, okay. So next, we are going to go. We went over that. Okay. All right. So we went over the deinstitutionalization. So okay. So we're gonna go into. So I just wanted to give you some background on all the deinstitutionalization, just so that we could get into what I wanted to discuss next. Okay. So that brings us. This brings us into and this is by W. Burr. It's a little old, but that's okay because the whole subject is pretty old. Um, so it's by W. Burr. It's the last bill JFK signed, and the mental health work is still in. So it says on October, and this is by Vic DeGravio. On October 31st, 1963, President John F. Kennedy signed a bill meant to free many thousands of Americans with mental illnesses from life in institutions. It envisioned building 1,500 outpatient mental health centers to offer them community based care instead. The bill would be the last piece of legislation Kennedy would ever sign. He was assassinated 3 weeks later. So before we go any farther, as you remember, when we just read the information about deinstitutionalization, we were saying again in 1955, right? So he signed this bill into law. This would have been what, 8 years later. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all ties together. So it says to mark the law's 50th anniversary, former Congressman Patrick Kennedy and others are convening at the Kennedy Law. Okay, so that happened a while ago, so no need to read that because it happened years ago. So I just want to provide information on this law that President John Kennedy signed 50 years ago. He signed it into law. The quality of life for hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children in Massachusetts and across America was studied in Britain. So it says when he signed it into law. For the most part, daily life was a grave taboo behind locked institutional doors, marked by inadequate treatment, primitive medications, and isolation from family, friends, and community. Patients in locked facilities were subject to retaliation if they claimed about the condition. I guess it is given like those older movies when you would see the patients in in hospitalization. You know those older films. And I'm trying to think of the one that had Angelina Jolie in it. So that's what it's given to me. So it says, and if they said anything to anybody, to their family members or anything, they would be subject to retaliation, so I'm pretty sure they didn't say much about it. Family members were frequently discouraged from inquiring about care. Massachusetts, and other states operated a patchwork of inpatient state hospitals that served as little more than systemic quarantine facilities. In the final bill he signed into law before his death, President Kennedy called for society to embrace a new vision for people with mental health disorders and developmental disabilities, one in which the cold mercy of custodial care will be replaced by the open warmth of community. So I kind of see where he was going there. I don't know if it gave what it was supposed to give, but I do, as I read more into this, I see where he was going because he was trying to make it be from this cold place where they were probably locked up, maybe probably seemed more like a actual jail because they was locked up, basically, that he wanted to like embrace them, right? And let them be embraced by the open warmth of community. Now, whether it went that way or not, we will keep reading to see. Since then, perhaps no other field of health has changed as much and affected as many people as positively as the treatment of people with mental illness. The shift from inpatient to community-based care has created a more humane, effective, and dignified network of support and treatment for men, women, and children. So, I'm just going to let you take this in for a second before I go any further. The three largest mental health providers in the nation today are jails. Okay, let's see what it says. In Massachusetts, we created a network of private community-based agencies to serve people where they work and live. Many of these organizations are members of the Association for Behavioral Health Care. These organizations serve over 750,000 men, women, and children each year. Okay, let me go down. Right, so it says the Community Mental Health Act reflected a bold new vision for the treatment of mental illness, but much remains to be done to fulfill that promise. While the legislation did usher in positive and hopeful changes for millions of people with serious illnesses such as schizophrenia, progress stalled because of funding challenges and continuing stigma. Only half of the proposed community mental health centers were ever built, and those were never fully funded. Drastic cuts were made to the remaining community mental health centers at the beginning of the Reagan administration. The lack of access to community-based care leads nowhere for the sickest people to turn, so they end up in hospital emergency rooms, homeless shelters, or prison. The three largest mental health providers in the nation today are jails. It says Cook County in Illinois, Los Angeles County, and Rikers Island. Let me just see if I can click on that and see what it says. All right, so we don't have anything there. All right. So it says the state and federal levels, further action is needed to fulfill President Kennedy's vision of accessible, quality, community-based care. Today in Congress, the pending Excellence in Mental Health Act will allow up to 1.5 million more Americans living with addiction and mental health needs, including 200,000 returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, to get the care. This bill has broad bipartisan support but has been held up by the budget stalemate. Okay, so let me just go to this part right here. So it says JFK's vision 50 years ago replaced despair with hope and opened the door for community-based treatment. In Massachusetts and across the country, we have seen countless people with mental illness and addiction disorders recover and live full, productive, and happy lives. We owe it to them to strengthen our resolve and go beyond promising quality mental health care. We must actually pay for it. Okay, so that's that. That's a little more information. The Community Health Act, the last bill that was signed from JFK. So now what we're going to does it, I'm pretty sure some people know, but does any, well, not the already know, but others, do you know why he was so, President JFK was so into the Community Mental Health Act and why he was shut into mental health on a whole, just in general? Let's talk about that. All right, here we go. Let me check my screen. Now, this is what I found out yesterday. I'm pretty sure some people know this, but this was very interesting to me. Okay, so y'all know what this is? Y'all know what this is? This is Rosemary Kennedy. This is John F. K's Kennedy, JFK's Kennedy, JFK's sister, Rosemary Kennedy. Okay, so there he is with his sister right here, and that's her. She was beautiful. Okay, let's read a little more about her. So it says more than 7 decades ago, JFK's troubled sister, Rosemary, was left disabled by disastrous lobotomy ordered by her father. So if you don't really know what lobotomy is, I suggest you go and look it up. But that was ordered by her father. So uh, so they were just talking about the 100th anniversary of her birth. This was definitely kept a secret from the whole family. The dad was the only person that knew she got a lobotomy. It had something to do with your brain, and they do operation on your brain back in the day. So it says, Darling Daddy, 22-year-old Rosemary Kennedy wrote in a 1940 letter to her father, Joseph P. Kennedy, then serving as U.S. Ambassador to Great Britain. I am so fond of you, and I love you so much. Just over a year later, that same woman, affectionate, dutiful, and always eager to please her father, was unable to form a sentence. And what would become a decades long secret and a source of deep shame for the most famous dynasty in American history, Joe and Rose Kennedy's intellectually disabled eldest daughter lost everything at age 23 when her father scheduled a catastrophic lobotomy that left her with the mental capacity of a toddler. After the secret surgery, it would be another 2 decades after Joe became incapacitated by a severe stroke in 1961. Before any of Rosemary's 8 siblings would learn the truth about their sister's disappearance, that she was living at a Catholic facility for the mentally disabled in Jefferson, hidden from public view. So let's just get into that. So for 20 years, that means JFK, which was our former president, and the rest of the brothers and sisters did not know where their sister was at for 20 years. They did not see her allegedly for 2 years, according to this article. Um, Now, for the first time, they do have 2 books about it. If you wanted to know more information, Rosemary, the Hidden Kennedy Sister. It says the author Kate Larson depicts a vivacious daughter with a perfect smile who struggled to find her place in a family that prized achievement and success above all else. For the first time, Larson tells the chilling events that deprived Rosemary's brain of oxygen during her birth on September the 13th, 1918. So it says Larson writes that when Rose went into labor with Rosemary, her third child, third, her third child, the nurse who was caring for her was reluctant to deliver a baby without a physician on hand. Though the nurse had the necessary training, when the doctor's arrival was delayed, she demanded that Rose hold your legs together tightly in the hope of delaying the baby's birth. When that failed, she resorted to holding the baby's head and forcing it back in the birth canal for 2 excruciating hours. As Rosemary grew into toddlerhood, Rose noticed that she was not like the others. The family did their best to incorporate her into their daily lives, taking her sailing and making sure she was always asked to dance at parties. But as Rosemary got older, she began to have tantrums that sometimes turned violent. At the same time, her voluptuous figure was attracting male attention, and Joel became concerned. An unwanted pregnancy in the family could damage his son's political career. The family tried to protect her, says Larson, but the situation was a ticking time bomb. Give me a second, y'all. Give me a second. Okay, I do apologize for that. I had someone at my door that I was not expecting. Okay, so let's get back to this. So we're talking about Rosemary Kennedy, and I left off talking about that the family tried to protect her, but the situation was literally a ticking time bomb. Okay, so this is in 1941. Joe scheduled Rosemary, which is, of course, Joe is the father, Rosemary for lobotomy. And at that time, it was an experimental procedure meant to make mentally ill patients more docile, so make them, more calm, and because that's all they had at the time, right? The surgery, writes Larson, involved drilling holes on both sides of Rosemary's head. inserting a spatula into her cranium near the frontal lobes and turning and scraping. But guess what? The surgery was botched, and Rosemary emerged almost completely disabled. So we went from when she was, let's go back up here and see, at 22, writing a letter to her father saying, I'm so fond of you and I love you so much, to, so that was 1940, to here we have at 1941, she was almost completely disabled. After housing her in a psychiatric in upstate New York for 7 years, Joe ordered his daughter sent to St. Coletta and never saw her again. Her siblings didn't see her for 2 decades. All right, so I think that's it. All right, so let me go here. So, what do y'all think about that? That's a lot, right? So, how many things? So that was 1941. President Kennedy signed the bill into law 1963, which some say was a direct response to his sister being institutionalized. So, okay, so there's that. Now we're going to go. You know what? Just okay. So what we're going to do? We've been here 46 minutes already. So it's going to be a part two to this. So I'm gonna let that sink in, right? Just getting the stage set to for us to go into the rest of the Mental Health Act. So next coming up, so we went into the deinstitutionalization started in 1955, and then we went into more into the Community Mental Health Act. That was the last law signed in by Kennedy, and then we also read about his sister Rosemary, who was dealing with mental health issues, and at the age of 22 was almost completely disabled and sent off to a institution, a mental health institution. But um, she would later be released from the institution, and some say allegedly that was Kennedy's response. His response was creating the Mental Health Act of 1963. So, and on our next live stream, we will go into what came next. So we're gonna go into Jimmy Carter's, uh, um, because he would also make a policy on mental health. So we'll go into his response to the mental health. Um, we'll go into that, and then we'll also go into Ronald Reagan's uh, his response. All right, so. Um, so yes, so we're going to go into all that on the next time we're together. All right, so I do have. Let's see. Yes, so we'll just get into all that the next time. We'll go into so as we know, JFK, that was JFK's last law signed into effect, and then we'll go into Jimmy Carter's response to mental health, and then also Ronald Reagan's. So Ronald Reagan, basically, the act that was signed into law by, and don't quote me on this. We'll go more into it when we come back. But Ronald Reagan struck this bill down. He struck this bill down. Okay, so you know what? Since we're here, we're gonna go into Ronald Reagan's side. We still have a few more minutes. Okay, let me share this. Let me just share. So it says Ronald Reagan's shameful legacy. Violence, the homeless, and mental illness. As president and governor of California, the GOP icon, led the worst policies on mental illness and generations. Okay, so let's see what it says. And this is by Dr. E. Fullatori, published 2013. It's from this site. It's not my work. I'm just sharing it for educational and research purposes. Um, in November 1980, Republican Ronald Reagan overwhelmingly defeated Jimmy Carter, who received less than 42% of the popular vote for president. Republicans took control of the Senate 53 to 46, the first time they had dominated either chamber since 1954. Okay, so although the House remained under Democratic control, 243 to 192, their margin was actually much slimmer because many Southern bold weevil Democrats voted with the Republicans. 1 month prior to the election, President Carter had signed the Mental Health Systems Act, which had proposed to continue the federal community, uh, which had proposed to continue the federal community mental health centers program, although with some additional state involvement. Consistent with the report of the Carter Commission, the act also included a provision for federal grants for projects for the prevention of mental illness and the promotion of positive mental health, indication of how little learning had taken place among the Carter Commission members and professionals at NIMH. With President Reagan and the Republicans taking over, the Mental Health Systems Act was discarded before the ink had dried, and the CMHC funds were simply blocked, granted to the states. The CMHC program had not only died but been buried as well. An autopsy could have listed the cause of death as nativity, complicated by grandiosity. So it says here, President Reagan never understood mental illness. Like Richard Nixon, he was a product of the Southern California culture that associated psychiatry with communism. 2 months after taking office, Reagan was shot by John Hinckley, a young man with untreated schizophrenia. That's the irony, right? 2 years later, Reagan called Dr. Roger Peel, then director of St. Elizabeth's Hospital, where Hinckley was being treated, and tried to arrange to meet with Hinckley so that Reagan could forgive him. Peel tactfully told the president that this was not a good idea at all. Reagan was also exposed to the consequences of untreated mental illness through the two sons of Roy Miller, who was his personal pacifier. Both sons developed schizophrenia. One committed suicide in 1981, and the other killed his mother in 1983. And despite such personal exposure, Reagan never exhibited any interest in the need for research or better treatment for serious mental illness. California has traditionally been on the cutting edge of American cultural development, with Anaheim and Modesto experiencing changes before Atlanta and Moline. This was also true in the exodus of patients from state psychiatric hospitals. So it says, beginning in the late 1950s, California became the national leader in aggressively moving patients from state hospitals to nursing homes and board and care homes, known in other states by names such as group homes, boarding homes, adult care homes, family care homes, assisted living facilities, community residential facilities, adult foster homes. traditional living facilities and residential care facilities. So if you recall earlier, we just talked about how beginning in 1955, they started closing the state mental hospitals. So this is California was one of the leading took the lead in taking in the people. So we were thinking about where they went. So basically went to nursing homes, boarding care homes, um, group homes, boarding homes, adult care homes, family care homes, assisted living facilities, community residential facilities, adult foster homes, traditional living facilities, and residential care facilities. Hospital wards closed as the patients left. By the time Ronald Reagan assumed the governorship in 1967, California had already deinstitutionalized more than half its state hospital patients. So that would have been what? 12 years later? Okay, so that same year, California passed the landmark Lanterman-Petrie Short Act, which virtually abolished involuntary hospitalization except in extreme cases. Thus, by the early 1970s, California had moved most mentally ill patients out of its state hospitals, and by passing LPS had made it very difficult to get them back into hospital if they relapsed and needed additional care. California thus became a canary in a coal mine in the institutionalization. The results were quickly apparent. As early as 1969, a study of California board and care homes described them as follows. These facilities are in most respects like small, long-term state hospital wards isolated from the community. One is overcome by the depressing atmosphere. They maximize the state hospital-like atmosphere. The operator is being paid by the head rather than being rewarded for rehabilitation efforts for her guests. Okay, so it says the study. This study was done by Richard Lamb, a young psychiatrist working for San Mateo County in the intervening years. He has continued to be the leading American psychiatrist, pointing out the failures of the institutionalization. By 1950, by 1975, board and care homes have become big business in California. In Los Angeles alone, there are approximately 11,000 at state hospital patients living in board and care facilities. Many of these homes were owned by for-profit chains such as Beverly Enterprises, which owned 38 homes. Many homes were regarded by the owners solely as a business, squeezing excessive profits out of it at the expense of residents. Five members of Beverly Enterprise boards of directors had ties to Governor Reagan. The chairman was vice chairman of a Reagan fundraising dinner, and four others were either politically active in one or both of the Reagan gubernatorial campaigns, and or contributed large or undisclosed sums of money to the campaign. So politics, you guys. Oh, politics. All right. Financial ties between the governor who is emptying state hospitals and business persons who are profiting from the process will also soon become apparent in other states. Many of the board and care homes in California, as elsewhere, were clustered in city areas that were run down and thus had low rents. In San Jose, for example, approximately 1,800 patients discharged from nearby Agnew State Hospital were placed in homes clustered in a campus of San Jose State University. As early as 1971, the local newspaper decried this mass invasion of mental patients. Some patients left their board and care homes because of the poor living conditions, whereas others were evicted when the symptoms of their illness recurred because they were not receiving medication. So let's read that again. So some patients left because of poor living conditions, where others were evicted because they didn't have a medication to upkeep their symptoms, and therefore they were just put out on the street, and they were resulted in homelessness. By 1973, the San Jose area was described as having discharged patients living on Skid Row. So there you go. That's the beginning of Skid Row. Wandering aimlessly in the streets, a ghetto for the mentally ill and mentally retarded. And of course, we don't say mentally retarded anymore, but this was what was going on back then. Similar communities become invisible in other California cities, as well as in New York. In Long Beach on Long Island, old motels and hotels were filled with patients discharged from near Creedmoor and Pilgrim State hospitals. By 1973, community residents were complaining that their town was becoming a psychiatric ghetto. At the local Catholic church, patients were said to have urinated on the floor during Mass and eaten the altar flowers. The Long Beach City Council therefore passed an ordinance requiring patients to take their prescribed medication at a conditioned level. Predictably, the New York Civil Liberties Union immediately challenged the ordinance as being unconstitutional and was so ruled. By this time, there were about 5,000 board and care homes in New York City, some with as many as 285 beds, and with up to 85% of their residents having been discharged from the state hospital. As one New York psychiatrist summarized the situation, the chronic mentally ill patient has had his slogan to living and care transferred from a single lousy institution to multiple rigid ones. Okay. All right, slowly. Okay, so we're gonna stop right here because I could go on and on with this. Like I said, there will be a part two of this. I don't want it. I don't want the video to be too long. So, like I said, thank you all for joining me. Even if you didn't catch it now, hopefully you'll go back and watch my stream. Like I said, we will be talking all things mental health, just trying to take the stigma off of mental health issues and just talking about it. There's no telling what we will talk about, but it will be all things mental health. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining. Bye bye.